the rooftop of the Parker Grand Hotel, a lavish party was underway. The crystal chandeliers shone brilliantly. Designer outfits sparkled as they mingled with the laughter echoing throughout the space. This was one of the most exclusive events among the elite, gathering entrepreneurs, politicians, and famous stars. Amidst the bustling atmosphere, Nathan Parker stood silently by the railing, his cold eyes observing everything from above. In his hand was a glass of red wine, the swirling liquid reflecting the dazzling lights. Everything happening around him was all too familiar. Men in impeccably tailored suits, women in dazzling gowns but with calculating glances. Nathan's life was always filled with parties like this, extravagant, superficial, and tasteless. As one of America's most successful young billionaires, Nathan Parker had it all. Money, power, women. He was used to having everything he desired within his grasp. Yet that also caused everything to lose its value. Looking down at the glass in his hand, he suddenly realized that a strange emptiness was seeping into his mind. How long had it been since he truly felt something new and exciting? Nathan took a sip of his wine, the spicy taste spreading across his tongue, but not enough to chase away the feeling of boredom. At that moment, a familiar voice sounded behind him. "Nathan, you still like to stand alone as always, huh?" Nathan turned around to see Michael Carter approaching, a glass of wine in hand, a provocative smile on his lips. Michael was an old friend from college, or more precisely a rival in many daring bets in the past. The two had fiercely competed in everything, from who could land a bigger contract, who owned the most expensive car, to dangerous games just to test each other's recklessness. Nathan smirked. "No one has beaten me yet, Michael." Michael laughed, his eyes full of provocation. "You always believe that money can buy everything, don't you?" Nathan shrugged, not denying it. For him, money had never been an issue. It was a tool, a power, something that controlled the entire world. Michael stepped closer, set his wine glass on the table, then pointed down to the sidewalk, where a young girl was huddled. "Then prove it." Nathan lowered his eyes in the direction Michael pointed. Under the dim streetlight, a girl was sitting on the roadside, her dirty, bare feet speckled with dust. Her disheveled hair nearly hid her face, and next to her was an old plastic cup, into which a few coins occasionally fell. A homeless person, or rather a pawn in a new game. Michael leaned against the railing, his eyes challenging. $2 million. I want to see if you can turn her into an upper-class lady and keep her as your wife for 3 months. Nathan was silent, intently watching the girl below. No one at this lavish party cared about her. She was like a part of a world they never bothered to look at. A thought flashed through his mind. A new game. A challenge enough to stir the boredom within him. 3 months? He asked, his voice tinged with disdain. Michael smirked. Only 3 months. But I bet you'll give up sooner. Nathan gently swirled the wine glass in his hand, contemplating. This wasn't just a bet. It was an opportunity to prove that his power extended far beyond money. If he could transform a homeless person into a true lady, then it meant he could control people as he wished. He smirked, his eyes gleaming with defiance. $2 million. Huh? You're underestimating me. Michael laughed and raised his glass. Then, let's see what you can do. After Michael left, Nathan remained standing in place, his gaze still fixed on the girl on the street. He wasn't exactly one to care about others, but this time something piqued his curiosity. Who was that girl? What had she gone through to fall into such a situation? And could she change? Nathan had never believed in fairy tales. He was not a man of dreams or miracles, but he believed in control. And now, he would control the fate of a human being exactly as he wanted. To him, this wasn't about love nor kindness. It was simply a new game. And Nathan Parker had never lost a game. Nathan left the party and stepped out onto the street. Curious eyes of the crowd followed as a man in a high-end suit approached a homeless girl. The girl shrank back under the streetlight, her blue eyes showing weariness and caution as she saw a stranger standing before her. "Do you want to change your life?" She looked up, her eyes betraying suspicion. "Who are you?" Nathan leaned down, a smile blending arrogance and mystery. "I am the one who can change your life, but in return, you must accept a crazy proposal." The girl hesitated. "What proposal?" Nathan squinted, his deep voice full of authority. "Marry me for 3 months." Emily sat facing Nathan Parker in the luxurious hotel room, a place she had never dared to dream of. The dinner in front of her was perhaps the most sumptuous meal she had ever seen. Pan-seared salmon, vegetables artfully arranged, red wine swirling in a crystal glass. But she could not eat. At the other side of the table, Nathan comfortably leaned back in his chair, swirling the wine glass in his hand, his sharp eyes never leaving her. "Do you agree or not?" His voice was calm and emotionless, as if this was just an ordinary business transaction. Emily felt her throat parched. A part of her wanted to stand up and leave immediately. A stranger had just proposed a sham marriage in exchange for money, $1 million. It sounded crazy, but that price was too attractive, too realistic for her. She bowed her head, her two hands clenching the thin collar of her shirt. She was too accustomed to poverty, to the cold that seeped into every bone on the winter nights on the streets, to the contemptuous looks of passers-by when she reached out for a few pennies. $1 million would not only change her life, but also help her assist others in similar circumstances. But could she exchange herself for that amount of money? Nathan noticed her hesitation. He set his wine glass down on the table and leaned forward, his voice becoming more assured. "What are you hesitating about? I am offering you a chance to change your life. 3 months, with no risk, and you will have $1 million in your hands. You can leave here as soon as the contract is over, completely free." Emily let out a soft laugh, but there was no joy in her voice. "No risk? A stranger proposing to marry me without any legitimate reason, and you expect me to trust you? Why me and not someone else? I do not believe in random acts of kindness." "Nathan Parker." Nathan shrugged, his expression unchanged. "Because you are in the right place at the right time, and I need someone who is not related to the upper class, someone without any hidden agenda. That's all." Emily was silent. What he said seemed reasonable, but she could not shake off the growing sense of unease in her heart. She had nothing left to lose, but she also did not want to become a pawn in the game of a wealthy man who enjoyed indulgence. "If I agree, I require some conditions." Nathan raised his eyebrows, seemingly surprised. Clearly, he did not expect a homeless girl to be able to impose conditions on him. "I am listening," he said, his voice full of challenge. Emily took a deep breath, gathering all her courage to speak. "Firstly, I want to have freedom for these 3 months. I am not a puppet for you to control. If I agree to live in your mansion, I still want the right to move about, read, and have my own space." Nathan nodded with no sign of objection. "Reasonable. Continue." "Secondly," Emily paused, looking straight into his eyes, "I want a clear clause in the contract that you are not allowed to force me to do anything I do not want, including physical actions." Nathan chuckled lightly. "Do you think I am that kind of person?" "I do not know what kind of person you are," Emily replied without hesitation, "but I do not want any risks." Nathan was silent for a few seconds, then nodded. "All right, I have no interest in violating your limits. Is there anything else?" Emily looked at him, deliberated for a moment before continuing. "Thirdly, I want a separate bank account opened in my name, with $1 million transferred into it immediately after the contract ends, and I will have access to it without needing your approval." Nathan smiled with delight. "You are not a naive girl, are you?" "I have not been naive for a long time." A moment of silence passed between the two. Finally, Nathan stood up, took out his phone, and immediately called his lawyer. "Prepare the contract according to the terms just mentioned. I want it done by tomorrow morning." Emily looked at him, her heart pounding. She still did not fully trust what she was doing, but at least she had protected herself as much as possible. "So it's done?" she asked, still not believing that everything had happened so quickly. Nathan nodded, his cold eyes momentarily revealing a hint of delight. "Done. Tomorrow we will be married." The next morning, Emily woke up in a luxurious hotel room, where the previous night she had slept on the most comfortable bed of her life. A thick contract was neatly placed on the table along with a pen. She picked up the contract, her eyes gliding over each clause. Everything was exactly as she had requested. Personal freedom, not being forced to do anything against her will, and the bank account would be opened in her name. Nathan entered the room in a white shirt and a neatly tied tie, as if he were about to engage in an important business deal. "Have you finished reading?" Emily nodded, her heart beating fast as she held the pen in her hand. This was the decisive moment. She took a deep breath, reminding herself that she was doing this not only for the money, but also for the opportunity to have a new life. The pen touched the paper, the black ink gliding along each word. The name Emily Clark was clearly written on the contract. Nathan took the document, signing his name below. "Congratulations, Mrs. Parker," he said, a slight smile appearing on his lips. Emily looked at him, her heart in turmoil. "We will see if this is the luckiest or the biggest mistake of my life," she murmured. Nathan just smiled, his sharp eyes containing a mystery that she could not yet understand. And so, a strange agreement was signed. A marriage without love, yet containing all the most unpredictable things in Emily's life. The luxury car rolled smoothly on the shiny asphalt road, leading to the giant iron gate. Parker Mansion stood tall before Emily's eyes, leaving her breathless. The elegant white walls, towering granite columns, and the perfectly manicured garden looked like a painting stepped out from a fairy tale. But for Emily, this place did not carry the enchanting aura of a fairy tale. It was a glamorous facade, a golden cage imprisoning her for the next 3 months. She swallowed hard, a restless feeling rising within her. Everything around was too unfamiliar, too different from the dusty streets and the street corners where she once slept overnight. The car door opened. Nathan stepped down first, extending his hand toward her more as a polite gesture than an expression of concern. "Welcome to your new home." His voice was indifferent, as if this were just a simple transaction. Emily did not take his hand. She stepped out of the car on her own, her eyes quickly scanning around. A group of servants stood neatly in front of the door, their hands clasped in front of their bellies, their indifferent eyes as if her appearance was nothing worth noting. An older woman, perhaps the housekeeper, stepped forward with a professional demeanor. "Welcome, Mrs. Parker." That new name made Emily freeze for a second. She was not yet accustomed to that title. It sounded like a joke. The housekeeper continued, revealing no emotion. "I am Mrs. Reynolds. I will be in charge of taking care of all your needs during your stay here." Emily nodded but still kept her distance. She did not trust anyone in this house. Nathan noticed her tension, but instead of reassuring her, he merely gave a slight smile. "Let's go," he said, and without waiting for Emily's reaction, he proceeded inside. She silently followed, but each step felt heavy as if they imprinted on an unfamiliar land. Inside, the mansion was even more magnificent than Emily had ever imagined. The high ceilings, the sparkling crystal chandeliers reflecting warm golden light onto the white marble floor. The walls were decorated with expensive paintings, each brushstroke exuding luxury. The grand staircase with gold-plated handrails led up to the second floor, which was surely Nathan's private area. Emily felt as though she had stepped into another world, a world where she did not belong. A young maid bowed to her, glancing at Emily's clothes, the outfit still wrinkled and not at all appropriate for this setting. She clearly saw the fleeting judgment in that glance. Emily squeezed her hands lightly, a feeling of humiliation rising. Nathan led her through a long corridor before stopping in front of a large wooden door. He pushed the door open, revealing a spacious room with a king-size bed covered in soft silk sheets, a wardrobe as large as a studio apartment, and a balcony overlooking the garden. "Everything you need is here," Nathan said. Emily stepped in, a suffocating feeling rising in her chest. The room was perhaps even larger than any place she had ever lived in her life, but that did not make her feel comfortable. "Is this going to be my room?" she asked, trying to hide her confusion. Nathan nodded. "Of course. You don't think we will share a room, do you?" His voice had a hint of mockery. Emily bit her lip, not replying. When Nathan left, she finally relaxed a little. But just a few minutes later, she realized another fact. This place was not entirely for her. Every time she stepped out of the room, Emily felt eyes watching her. The servants in Parker Mansion were too polite, but their professionalism made her uncomfortable. One afternoon, while taking a walk in the garden, she caught two servants talking. Yesterday, the boss took her in. A homeless girl. Unbelievable. Emily stopped. She did not listen further, turning away and leaving. But her heart beat strongly. They knew about her, and they were judging her. Of course they did. Someone like her did not belong in this place. She returned to her room, closing the door firmly. Approaching the large mirror, she looked at herself in it. A girl with messy hair, wearing the simple dress that the housekeeper had prepared. A girl not worthy of these gold-plated walls. She took a deep breath, clenching her hands. "All right, If they think she is inferior, she will prove them wrong. Nathan did not spend much time at home, but every time they encountered each other, the atmosphere became unbearably tense. One evening, they met in the dining room. Emily sat at the head of the table, a meter away from Nathan, that distance like an invisible wall. Nathan flipped through the newspaper, nonchalantly asking, "How was your first day here?" She shrugged. "Extravagant. Cold." Nathan laughed. "You'll get used to it." "Maybe," Emily replied, "but I'm not sure I want to." Nathan raised his eyebrows, putting the newspaper down. "So what do you want?" Emily looked straight into his eyes. "Freedom." An uncomfortable silence followed. Finally, Nathan stood up, tossing a napkin onto the table. "You have 3 months to enjoy this life, Emily. Learn to accept it." He left, leaving Emily with a storm of emotions swirling inside her. Emily sat silently on the long chair in the lavishly decorated room of Parker Mansion. The dim light from the ceiling lamp reflected off the expensive paintings hanging on the walls. But she no longer had the mind to admire that splendor. Her heart pounded as fragments of long-forgotten memories rushed back, each detail so clear as to be painful. She had met Nathan Parker before, not on the street. Not when he approached her with a marriage proposal filled with skepticism, but rather in a luxurious office where she had once placed all her hope for a better future. 3 years ago, Emily stood before the shiny glass door of Parker Enterprises, her hands clutching her job application so tightly that her fingers went numb. She had spent the whole week preparing for this interview, rereading her CV dozens of times, researching every possible piece of information about the company, and even rehearsing her answers in front of the mirror. This was her last chance. Since losing her job at her previous company due to layoffs, Emily had struggled with her meager savings, submitting applications everywhere but receiving no response. But Parker Enterprises was different. This was a large corporation. A stable job here could help her regain the life she had lost. With that thought, she took a deep breath and stepped inside. The spacious interview waiting room, with its expensive sofas and other candidates waiting, all dressed neatly, their faces full of confidence. Emily could not help but feel overwhelmed. The office dress she had, borrowed from a friend, seemed too old-fashioned compared to the trendy suits around. But she dismissed the insecurity and sat down, silently reviewing the key points in her CV. After a while, a secretary came out calling her name. "Emily Clark, please come in." She stood up, adjusted her coat, and entered the interview room. Inside, a large table was placed in the center of the room, with recruiters around it. But the only person who immediately captured her attention was the man sitting in the center, Nathan Parker. Even 3 years ago, he had exuded an overwhelming aura, a cold face, a sharply tailored suit without a wrinkle, blue eyes full of calculation staring at her with an arrogance she could not forget. "Sit down," Nathan ordered without bothering to look up from her file. Emily swallowed hard and sat down, her hand unconsciously clenching the hem of her dress. The interview began. She answered each question carefully, trying to demonstrate her enthusiasm and expertise. She spoke about her work experience, her skills, and her diligence. But Nathan was different. He only skimmed through her file carelessly, occasionally raising his eyebrows with an expression of boredom. After a while, he suddenly leaned back in his chair and stared at her intently. "Do you really think you are suitable for this company?" That question made Emily pause. "I believe that with my skills and experience, I can contribute to the development of—" "No," Nathan interrupted with a smirk. "I mean, do you think you can work in an environment of this caliber?" Emily's eyes widened, a feeling of offense rising in her chest. "I do not understand what you mean," she said, her voice calm but slightly trembling. Nathan flipped through her file once more, then pushed it aside as if it was not worth looking at. "Your file is quite basic. There is nothing special. You once worked as an office employee in a small company and then got fired. No impressive qualifications, no outstanding skills. And frankly," he paused, his eyes looking at her from head to toe with appraisal, "you do not fit our culture." Emily felt as if she had been slapped in the face. "I can learn and adapt. I am a hard worker, and I believe that we do not have time to train amateurs." Nathan smirked, his eyes cold. The entire room fell into silence. Emily clenched her hands, feeling her self-esteem being crushed bit by bit. She could see sympathetic looks from some of the other recruiters, but no one spoke up against Nathan. What had she hoped for? That they would give her a chance? That they would see her efforts? She was mistaken. Nathan glanced at his watch, then looked toward the secretary. "We've spent too much time already. Do we have the next candidate? The secretary nodded. Then this concludes here. Nathan did not bother to look at Emily again. Emily felt blood rush to her face. She stood up, clutching her file tightly, and quickly walked out of the room, feeling humiliation burning every cell in her body. As soon as she reached the corridor, she could no longer control herself. Tears streamed down her face, her legs trembling to the extent that she had to lean against the nearby wall to avoid collapsing. Nathan's words kept repeating in her head like a curse. We do not have time for amateurs. Emily shuddered as that memory ended. She looked at Nathan, the man sitting in the study, completely oblivious to their past. Her hand clenched into a fist. Unbelievable. The man had destroyed her confidence, pushed her into a path of despair, and now he was her husband, if only in name. Emily took a deep breath, trying to control the anger and pain surging in her chest. But she knew one thing for sure. She could not let Nathan Parker control her life ever again. Emily walked slowly down the wide corridor of Parker Mansion. The dim light from the chandeliers reflected on the marble floor, creating a mysterious and cold space. It had been many weeks since she married Nathan, but the feeling of estrangement still enveloped her. Although she had gradually become accustomed to the luxurious lifestyle, a part of her still could not fully trust this man. Tonight, Nathan was busy in his office, and Emily sensed that something was not right. Throughout dinner, he kept checking his watch, his expression pensive, as if he were waiting for something. Her unease grew when she heard Nathan's deep voice coming from the office. The door was slightly closed, and from inside, she heard him talking on the phone. Normally, she would not care about his private matters, but there was something in Nathan's tone that made her stop. She quietly moved closer, standing pressed against the wall, trying not to make any noise. She held her breath as Nathan's voice clearly rang through the crack in the door. Michael, don't mention that anymore. Yes. She still doesn't know anything. There was a brief pause. I know, the original bet was just a game, but now everything has gotten out of control. Emily stiffened. Her heart seemed to stop as she heard those words. The bet? She tried to take a deep breath, but it felt as if the air was being sucked out of her lungs. She pressed her ear against the door, trying to listen more clearly. You can stop if you want, but I won't, Nathan continued. I have invested too much in this. Do you think I will throw away $2 million just because of a slight feeling? In the end, she is nothing but a pawn in my game. Emily's hands trembled. She could barely keep her balance. Nathan's words were like a knife stabbing straight into her heart. Everything she had ever thought could change, could be better, now turned out to be nothing but a prearranged play. She was merely a part of the bet, a puppet in his game. Nathan had never been one to lose control. Throughout his life, he had run Parker Enterprises with an iron fist, allowing no element to stray from the plan. But now, for the first time in his life, he could not control the situation, and that drove him mad. Nathan drove through the rain-soaked streets, his eyes continuously scanning for a small figure with tousled brown hair under the rain. He had called every contact he could think of, from hotels to hospitals, even the police, but there was not a trace of Emily. The rain grew heavier by the moment. The streets became slippery, and the headlights reflected off the accumulated water, creating blurry streaks of light. But all that only made Nathan more infuriated. What had he done? The image of Emily, tearful as she faced the truth about the bet, reappeared in his mind like a knife plunging into his heart. She had believed him, had begun to open her heart, and he had pushed her away. His breathing grew rapid. What if something happened to her? What if she was taken advantage of by a bad person? What if she fell back into the cold streets as before meeting him? That thought made Nathan's whole body tense. At this moment, it was no longer about a bet, no longer about pride. This was Emily, the only girl who had made him feel something beyond numbers and profits. The only girl who had challenged him, refused to submit to him, and was also the only one he could not bear to see hurt. Nathan veered the car onto the shoulder, his trembling hands clenching the steering wheel. The rain poured down mercilessly, obscuring his view ahead. He closed his eyes, trying to slow his racing heart. But then, a memory flooded back. I'm not a toy for you to use in a bet, Nathan. I believed in you. Emily's broken voice echoed in his head. Nathan's eyes flew open. No, he could not let her go like that. For the first time in his life, he felt that he might lose the most important thing. And that was not money or fame. He dialed a number once again. Charles, have someone search all the train stations, bus stations, anywhere Emily might go to leave the city. Inform me immediately when there is any news. He hung up, slamming the steering wheel hard, feeling more helpless than ever. Then, in that moment, an idea flashed in his mind. The subway station. Without hesitation, Nathan stepped on the gas, speeding toward the city center. The car slid lightly on the wet road, but he did not care. Every sense was focused on one thing: finding Emily before it was too late. When he reached the subway station, he jumped out of the car without bothering to close the door and ran down the slippery stairs. His eyes scanned quickly across the rows of waiting seats. Homeless people huddled in corners, avoiding the cold rain. And then, in the distance, he saw her. Emily. She sat curled up on a bench, tightly wrapped in an old coat. Her face pale, her lips chapped, her body trembling from the cold. Her hair was disheveled, with raindrops clinging to her long lashes. Nathan's heart tightened. He quickly moved toward her, but when he was a few steps away, Emily looked up. Her blue eyes, now full of weariness and hurt, met his gaze. "What are you doing here?" she stammered, her voice hoarse. Nathan knelt before her, disregarding the puddle of cold water on the floor. He wanted to touch her, to hold her, but his hand stopped midair. "Emily," his voice trembled. "You cannot leave like this." Emily took a deep breath, but a sudden cough made her hunch further. Nathan immediately took off his coat and wrapped it tightly around her. She shrank back. "Why do you care? I'm just a bet to you." Nathan clenched his jaw, pain weighing heavily on his chest. "No, it's not like that." He swallowed hard, struggling to find words to express the chaotic emotions within. "I was wrong, Emily. I was foolish and selfish, but I cannot let you leave like this." She glared at him, her eyes shimmering with tears. "Why? Why should I believe you?" He took her hand, not forcing, just gently. "Because I need you." She fell silent, not because of the bet, not because of pride, but because I cannot bear the thought of losing you. Both fell into silence, with only the sound of rain softly dripping onto the cold ground. A tear rolled down Emily's cheek. Nathan took a deep breath, his eyes shining with absolute sincerity. "Let me take you home." Emily looked at him for a long time. Then, seemingly exhausted, she nodded slightly. Nathan said no more. He gently scooped Emily up, holding her tightly in his arms, as if afraid that if he let go, she would vanish forever. On the way back, Nathan said nothing. He just held the steering wheel tightly, occasionally glancing at Emily resting her head against the window, her eyes half closed. He knew this was only the beginning of a long journey. He would have to prove himself. He would have to win back her trust. But now he no longer doubted. He knew what he wanted, and he would not lose her again. Nathan Parker sat by Emily's hospital bed, silently watching her labored breaths. Her face was still pale after days of exhaustion from the fever. A heavy sense of guilt pressed against his chest, a feeling he had never experienced before. In the past, everything to him could be measured in money. But now, looking at the woman before him, he realized there were things far more valuable than wealth: trust, sincerity, and love. When the doctor announced that Emily needed a few more days of rest before being discharged, Nathan decided not to leave. He sat by her side every day, sometimes just watching her sleep in silence, sometimes reading the newspaper, or simply reflecting on what he had done. He didn't force her to talk, nor did he try to apologize in a forced manner. He understood that if he truly wanted to change, he had to act instead of just speaking empty words. As Emily gradually recovered, she still kept her distance from Nathan. She was no longer explosively angry as before, but neither was she quick to forgive. One day, as they sat together in the hospital room, Emily looked straight into his eyes and said, "You want me to believe that you've changed? Step out of your luxurious world and see what this world really looks like." Those words haunted Nathan throughout the night. The next morning, he made a bold decision. No longer a boss sitting atop a throne controlling money, he wanted to see for himself the poorest corners of the city, to truly understand a life he had never cared about before. Nathan started by driving to a rundown neighborhood, a place crowded with the homeless. It was a place he had never set foot in before, a place where the wealthy like him merely passed by without a second glance. As he stepped out of his car, he hesitated. He wore simpler clothes than usual, yet he couldn't entirely mask his affluent appearance. Walking along a narrow street, he saw a group of homeless people huddled beneath a bridge, shivering in the bitter morning cold. A middle-aged woman with tangled hair and tattered clothes sat quietly, holding a small child in her arms. The child, about 3 years old, had a pale face and dull eyes from hunger. The woman saw Nathan and immediately shrank back, as if afraid he would chase them away. Nathan slowly knelt before her. "I'm not here to bother you. I just want to know, what's your name?" The woman looked up at him, wary. Linda. How long have you been living here?" She let out a bitter laugh. "Long enough that I've lost track. I once had a family, a job, but when my husband died in a work accident, I couldn't afford the rent. Soon after, my son and I were thrown out onto the streets. I tried to find a job, but no one would hire a single mother without a degree. We've been wandering for 2 years now." Nathan listened, his heart heavy. He had never imagined people living in such conditions. He pulled a wad of cash from his pocket and handed it to her. But Linda only looked at him without reaching out to take it. "I don't need money. I need an opportunity," she said, her voice trembling. "I need a job, a home, a future for my son. Money might help us for a few days, but then I'll be right back where I started. I don't want to live like this forever." For the first time in his life, Nathan felt small. Money couldn't solve everything. He realized he needed to do more than just throw a few bills at the problem. After meeting Linda, Nathan decided to launch a project to support the homeless. But this time, he wouldn't just donate to a charity like before. He wanted to be personally involved in making a change. He bought an old building in the city center and renovated it into a support center. There, he hired counselors, doctors, and people who had once been in similar situations to help those in real need. Not stopping there, Nathan also established a job training program for the homeless, equipping them with skills to find work. He connected with businesses to create employment opportunities for them. The project quickly grew, attracting many volunteers. Emily, though still skeptical of Nathan, couldn't deny what he was doing. One day, she visited the center and saw Nathan sitting with a group of street children, listening to their stories, helping them learn how to write job applications. "What are you doing?" she asked, still somewhat cautious. Nathan looked up, his gaze firm. "I'm changing, not just for you, but for myself." As time passed, Emily slowly opened her heart. She saw that Nathan was no longer the cold, selfish man she once despised. He spent more time helping others, no longer seeing money as a tool to control everything. One night, as they stood on the rooftop of the support center, looking down at the bustling streets below, Emily softly said, "I haven't fully forgiven you yet, but I see that you're trying, and that means something." Nathan turned to look at her, expecting nothing more. "I don't need immediate forgiveness. I just need a chance to prove that I've truly changed." Emily nodded slightly, and in that moment, for the first time, she allowed Nathan to take one step closer to her heart. Emily sat by the window of the studio, the late afternoon sunlight streaming through the glass and bathing her paintings in a brilliant golden hue. Although in recent days she had gradually sensed a change from Nathan, her heart was still not completely at ease. The past was still there, like an invisible wall preventing her from fully opening her heart to him. Nathan had done everything to prove his sincerity. He participated in charity projects, spent time with the poor, and even refused billion-dollar deals if they did not truly bring value to the community. But is that change permanent, or just a mask he was trying to keep? That night, as Emily was preparing for sleep, Nathan's phone rang. The name on the screen surprised him. Michael Carter. Nathan stared at the screen for a moment before picking up the phone. "Michael, what's going on?" Nathan asked, his voice revealing his irritation. "Nathan, long time no see. I think we need to have a talk. I'm at our old bar. Come over. I have something interesting I want to show you." Nathan hesitated. He knew he was no longer the person he used to be. But Michael, he always had a way of dragging people back into the darkness. He turned to look at Emily lying on the bed, the gentle look in her eyes over the past few days having been the motivation for him to refuse. But if he did not go, would that be a sign of weakness? No. He needed to settle this once and for all. "All right, I'll be there immediately." When Nathan arrived at the bar, Michael was already seated in a shadowy corner with a glass of whiskey in hand. Everything there remained unchanged. Still the place that Nathan once considered familiar territory, where negotiations took place in dim lights and soft jazz music. "Nathan, sit down. I've already ordered you a drink," Michael said, a sly smile clearly appearing on his face. Nathan pulled out a chair and sat down, folding his arms across his chest. "Speak quickly, Michael. I don't have much time." Michael laughed derisively, took a sip of his drink, then leaned forward, his voice full of insinuation. "I see you're still playing the role of the good guy. But how long do you plan to do that? Do you really think she'll believe you?" Nathan squinted, tension spreading in the air. "Emily is not like the others. She has a strong heart, and I will not do anything to hurt her again." Michael burst into loud laughter, shaking his head as if Nathan had just said something utterly ridiculous. "Oh, Nathan, have you really changed now? You used to be a man who didn't believe in love, who believed in nothing but money and power. But what about now? Are you really trying to tell me that you love that girl?" Nathan did not hesitate. "Yes, I love her, and nothing you say can change that." Michael raised an eyebrow, then placed a black envelope on the table and shoved it toward Nathan. "Then you should take a look at this." Nathan stared intently at the envelope, then slowly opened it. Inside were a series of photographs of Emily in the past. The days when she used to wander the streets, the days when she desperately searched for a job, the moments when she was evicted from the places where she had tried to beg. Michael had hired someone to investigate her, uncovering all the worst moments of her life. "What the hell are you doing?" Nathan asked, his voice full of indignation. Michael shrugged. "You can use these to protect yourself. If one day Emily decides to leave you, you can use them to control her. Isn't that the way you used to do it, Nathan? Holding power in your hands and controlling everything as you wished?" Nathan clenched his fists, anger rising in his chest. Perhaps before, he would not have hesitated to take advantage of this. But now, that thought disgusted him. "I don't need these things, Michael. Emily is not a pawn in my chess game. She is the woman I love, and I will never hurt her like that." Michael blinked, seemingly surprised by the firmness in Nathan's voice. "You have really changed," he muttered, then smirked. "But remember my words, Nathan. No one truly changes. One day you'll go back to being the person you used to be." Nathan stood up and pushed the envelope back toward Michael. "You're wrong. I have found something more important than money and power. I have found true love, and you will never be able to destroy that." With that, he turned and left the bar, leaving Michael with a faint smile on his lips. Returning to the mansion, Nathan found Emily sitting in the studio, quietly painting. She turned to look at him, her eyes showing worry. "Where have you been?" Nathan slowly walked over and placed his hand on the drawing table. "I just met Michael. He gave me this." He set a photograph in front of Emily, a picture of her sitting alone on a sidewalk during the darkest days of her life. Emily froze, her heart tightening. "Did you keep these things?" Nathan shook his head. "No, I rejected them. I don't need them to keep you by my side. I believe in you, in us, and I want you to believe in me too." Emily looked at him for a long time, then suddenly burst into tears. She cried not because of the pain, but because she felt, for the first time, a complete sense of safety in her heart. Nathan had had the chance to revert to his old self, but he did not. He had chosen her, chose love. She stepped forward and wrapped her arms tightly around him. "Thank you for not hurting me any further." Nathan held her tightly in his arms, and for the first time in many years, he knew that he had truly found the meaning of his life. Emily sat by the window of the studio, the late afternoon sunlight streaming through the glass and bathing her paintings in a brilliant golden hue. Although in recent days she had gradually sensed a change from Nathan, her heart was still not completely at ease. The past was still there, like an invisible wall preventing her from fully opening her heart to him. Nathan had done everything to prove his sincerity. He participated in charity projects, spent time with the poor, and even refused billion-dollar deals if they did not truly bring value to the community. But is that change permanent, or just a mask he was trying to keep? That night, as Emily was preparing for sleep, Nathan's phone rang. The name on the screen surprised him. Michael Carter. Nathan stared at the screen for a moment before picking up the phone. "Michael, what's going on?" Nathan asked, his voice revealing his irritation. Nathan, long time no see. I think we need to have a talk. I'm at our old bar. Come over. I have something interesting I want to show you. Nathan hesitated. He knew he was no longer the person he used to be. But Michael, he always had a way of dragging people back into the darkness. He turned to look at Emily lying on the bed. The gentle look in her eyes over the past few days having been the motivation for him to refuse. But if he did not go, would that be a sign of weakness? No. He needed to settle this once and for all. All right, I'll be there immediately. When Nathan arrived at the bar, Michael was already seated in a shadowy corner with a glass of whiskey in hand. Everything there remained unchanged. Still the place that Nathan once considered familiar territory, where negotiations took place in dim lights and soft jazz music. Nathan, sit down. I've already ordered you a drink, Michael said, a sly smile clearly appearing on his face. Nathan pulled out a chair and sat down, folding his arms across his chest. Speak quickly, Michael. I don't have much time. Michael laughed derisively, took a sip of his drink, then leaned forward, his voice full of insinuation. I see you're still playing the role of the good guy, but how long do you plan to do that? Do you really think she'll believe you? Nathan squinted, tension spreading in the air. Emily is not like the others. She has a strong heart, and I will not do anything to hurt her again. Michael burst into loud laughter, shaking his head as if Nathan had just said something utterly ridiculous. Oh, Nathan, have you really changed now? You used to be a man who didn't believe in love, who believed in nothing but money and power. But what about now? Are you really trying to tell me that you love that girl? Nathan did not hesitate. Yes, I love her, and nothing you say can change that. Michael raised an eyebrow, then placed a black envelope on the table and shoved it toward Nathan. Then you should take a look at this. Nathan stared intently at the envelope, then slowly opened it. Inside were a series of photographs of Emily in the past. The days when she used to wander the streets, the days when she desperately searched for a job, the moments when she was evicted from the places where she had tried to beg. Michael had hired someone to investigate her, uncovering all the worst moments of her life. What the hell are you doing? Nathan asked, his voice full of indignation. Michael shrugged. You can use these to protect yourself. If one day Emily decides to leave you, you can use them to control her. Isn't that the way you used to do it, Nathan? Holding power in your hands and controlling everything as you wished? Nathan clenched his fists, anger rising in his chest. Perhaps before, he would not have hesitated to take advantage of this. But now, that thought disgusted him. I don't need these things, Michael. Emily is not a pawn in my chess game. She is the woman I love, and I will never hurt her like that. Michael blinked, seemingly surprised by the firmness in Nathan's voice. You have really changed, he muttered, then smirked. But remember my words, Nathan. No one truly changes. One day you'll go back to being the person you used to be. Nathan stood up and pushed the envelope back toward Michael. You're wrong. I have found something more important than money and power. I have found true love, and you will never be able to destroy that. With that, he turned and left the bar, leaving Michael with a faint smile on his lips. Returning to the mansion, Nathan found Emily sitting in the studio, quietly painting. She turned to look at him, her eyes showing worry. Where have you been? Nathan slowly walked over and placed his hand on the drawing table. I just met Michael. He gave me this. He set a photograph in front of Emily, a picture of her sitting alone on a sidewalk during the darkest days of her life. Emily froze, her heart tightening. Did you keep these things? Nathan shook his head. No, I rejected them. I don't need them to keep you by my side. I believe in you, in us, and I want you to believe in me too. Emily looked at him for a long time, then suddenly burst into tears. She cried not because of the pain, but because she felt, for the first time, a complete sense of safety in her heart. Nathan had had the chance to revert to his old self, but he did not. He had chosen her, chose love. She stepped forward and wrapped her arms tightly around him. Thank you for not hurting me any further. Nathan held her tightly in his arms, and for the first time in many years, he knew that he had truly found the meaning of his life. The afternoon sky was tinged with a somber orange, creating a magical atmosphere over the vast garden of Parker Mansion. In recent days, Nathan Parker had steadfastly maintained Emily's trust, even though he knew that within her soul, there were still wounds not yet fully healed. She had gradually removed her shield, accepting Nathan but not fully agreeing to go further. However, today, Nathan decided to confront his worries. He knew that only sincerity and action could prove his love for Emily. He had prepared something special, a painting. During the time Emily lived at the mansion, she often visited the art room, where she found peace in the brushstrokes. Among those paintings, there was one unfinished work, left incomplete like the lives of Emily and Nathan when fate had entwined them. Nathan had quietly finished that painting, with delicate details, the once unfinished work now seeming to have reached a perfect ending. He decided to use this painting as a true promise. That afternoon, Nathan invited Emily to take a walk in the garden. The trees around shimmered under the setting sun, just romantic enough, yet causing Emily to become cautious. "Nathan, you seem very different today." She squinted at him. Nathan smiled lightly. "I have something to give you." He led her to a seat under the canopy of an old willow, then took out a painting wrapped in a thin cloth. "I have finished it for you," he said, unwrapping the cloth. Emily's eyes widened when she saw the painting. It depicted two silhouettes on an ancient bridge, as if two people were walking together toward the future. "Nathan," she said, unable to speak. He knelt down, retrieving from his pocket a secret ring that had been hidden deep within the painting. "Emily Clark, do you agree to become my wife? Not for a contract, but for true love?" Emily looked at him, her heart ablaze. Finally, she smiled and nodded. "I agree, Nathan." Nathan slowly slipped the ring onto her finger, and they exchanged a tight embrace under the fading sky. The late afternoon sky was tinged with a warm, somber orange, creating a magical atmosphere over the vast garden of Parker Mansion. In recent days, Nathan Parker had stubbornly held on to Emily's trust, even though he knew that deep in her soul, there were still wounds not yet fully healed. She had gradually shed her protective shield, accepting Nathan but not fully willing to go further. However, today, Nathan decided to confront his own worries. He knew that only sincerity and action could prove his love for Emily. He had prepared something special, a painting. During the time Emily lived at the mansion, she often visited the art room, where she found peace in the brushstrokes. Among those paintings, there was one unfinished work, left incomplete like the lives of Emily and Nathan when fate had entwined them. Nathan had quietly finished that painting, with delicate details, the once unfinished work now seeming to have reached a perfect ending. He decided to use this painting as a true promise. That afternoon, Nathan invited Emily to take a walk in the garden. The trees around shimmered under the setting sun, both romantic and causing Emily to remain cautious. "Nathan, you seem very different today," she asked, squinting at him. Nathan smiled lightly. "I have something to give you." He led her to a seat under the canopy of an old willow, then produced a painting wrapped in a thin cloth. "I have finished it for you," he said as he unwrapped the cloth. Emily's eyes widened when she saw the painting. It depicted two silhouettes on an ancient bridge, as if two people were walking together toward the future. "Nathan," she began, unable to speak. He knelt down and, reaching into his pocket, revealed a secret ring that had been hidden deep within the painting. "Emily Clark, do you agree to become my wife? Not for a contract, but for true love?" Emily looked at him, her heart aflame. Finally, she smiled and nodded. "I agree, Nathan." Nathan slowly slipped the ring onto her finger, and they exchanged a tight embrace under the fading sky. The evening deepened as the sun gradually set, bathing the garden in a warm golden-orange glow. Emily and Nathan sat on the porch, watching their daughter Grace play with the little puppies. A gentle breeze rustled the tree branches, carrying the pure laughter of the little girl echoing throughout the Parker Mansion estate. Emily leaned back in her chair, a soft hand clutching a cup of hot tea. Her eyes followed Grace, but her mind drifted back to days gone by, days filled with storms, challenges, and pain intertwined with forgiveness. She smiled softly as she thought about her journey. Nathan sat beside her, his eyes no longer as cold as before, but now tinged with the passage of time, calm and profound. He raised his hand to gently stroke the silver-streaked hair on Emily's head, his gaze gentler than ever. "What are you thinking about?" Nathan asked, his voice deep and warm, filled with genuine concern. Emily smiled lightly, placing her teacup on the table. About us, about everything that has happened. Nathan nodded, his eyes gazing into the distance where the trees swayed in the gentle breeze. If someone had told me that today we would be sitting here together watching our daughter play, I would never have believed it. Me neither, Emily sighed softly. There were times when I thought I would never be able to forgive you, never be able to trust you again. But as time passed, you showed me that people can change. Nathan took her hand. The calluses on his hand now, not just a mark of a cold businessman, but also a testament to a man who had spent his life trying to atone for his mistakes. I did many wrong things in the past. His voice trembled slightly. I once thought I could control everything, but I couldn't control what was most important, my own heart. And I almost lost you forever. Emily squeezed his hand gently. But you turned around. You changed not just for me, but for yourself. And that makes me believe that forgiveness is worth it. A long silence fell between them, broken only by the rustling of leaves and the crisp laughter of Grace chasing after a little puppy running around the lawn. Nathan looked at Emily for a long moment, then spoke slowly. If you could go back to that day, the day I made that foolish bet, do you think we would have reached today? Emily was silent for a long while. She knew that question did not have a simple answer. She lightly touched the silver butterfly necklace, a memento that Nathan had given her on the day he proposed. I don't know, she admitted. Perhaps if it weren't for that bet, we might never have met in that way. But if you hadn't changed, if you were still the Nathan Parker of before, then no matter how we met, we would never have this happiness. Nathan nodded slowly, lost in thought. I once believed that money could buy everything, but looking back, I realized that the most precious things in this life cannot be bought. Love, trust, forgiveness. Emily smiled, her gaze soft yet resolute. You learned that lesson the hard way, but what matters is that you learned, and I am proud of you for that. Nathan looked at her, his eyes glistening with emotion. I never thought I would have a real family, a family not bound by profit or duty, but by true love. They watched as Grace ran back to them with a radiant smile, her eyes sparkling with innocence and joy. Mom, Dad, I've named the puppy. It's going to be Lucky, because I think I'm really lucky to have you both. Emily looked at Nathan. Their eyes met in a moment filled with meaning. Nathan leaned down and scooped Grace up, holding her close. I think Lucky is a perfect name, because you are the greatest luck that has ever come to us. Emily looked around at the scene before her, her heart overflowing with peace. She was no longer the angry, wounded, homeless girl of years past. Nathan was no longer the cold man who treated people as pawns in his game. They had changed together, learned to love together, and built a true family together. The sun gradually set, leaving the final streaks of light on the deep purple sky. Emily rested her head on Nathan's shoulder, feeling his familiar warmth. And in that moment, she knew that they had truly found happiness, not because of fate, but because they had chosen to walk together no matter what. Nathan, she whispered, do you know what makes me the happiest? What is it? He asked, gently placing a kiss on her hair. Emily smiled. It's knowing that we never gave up on each other. Nathan squeezed her hand, his eyes full of love. I will never ever give up on us. Emily, never. And under the gentle sunset sky, they sat together, watching their daughter run and play on the lawn, knowing that no matter what challenges life brought, they would always be together, forever.
The content of this story has been edited by our editorial team, based on a true story. The names of the characters have been changed to protect their privacy and identity.